Good morning. And we continue with habit 5. There's a train coming pretty soon, so we may have a little pause. It's a beautiful morning. Thank you for being with me. We continue on page 251 of habit 5 from the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey. By seeking first to understand, this father has just turned a transactional opportunity into a transformational opportunity. Instead of interacting on a surface, get the job done level of communication, he has created a situation in which he can now have transforming impact, not only on his son, but also on the relationship. By setting aside his own autobiography and really seeking to understand, he has made a tremendous deposit in the emotional bank account that has empowered his son to open layer upon layer and get to the real issue. Now, father and son are on the same side of the table, looking at the problem. Instead of on opposite sides looking across at each other, the son is opening his father's autobiography and asking for advice. Even as the father begins to counsel, however, he needs to be sensitive to his son's communication. As long as the response is logical, the father can effectively ask questions and give counsel. But the moment the response becomes emotional, he needs to go back to empathic listening. And we continue with our dialogue. Well, I can see some things you might want to consider. Like what, Dad? Like getting some special help with your reading. Maybe they have some kind of tutoring program over at the tech school. I've already checked into that. It takes 2 nights and all day Saturday. That would take so much time. Sensing emotion in that reply, the father moves back to empathy. That's too much of a price to pay. Besides, Dad, I told the 6th graders I'd be their coach. You don't want to let them down. But I'll tell you this, Dad. If I really thought that tutoring course would help, I'd be down there every night. I'd get someone else to coach those kids. You really want the help, but you doubt if the course will make a difference. Do you think it would, Dad? The son is once more open and logical. He's opening his father's autobiography again. Now the father has another opportunity to influence and transform. There are times when transformation requires no outside counsel. Often when people are really given the chance to open up, they unravel their own problems, and the solutions become clear to them in that process. At other times, they really need additional perspective and help. The key is to genuinely seek the welfare of the individual, to listen with empathy, to let the person get to the problem and the solution at his own pace and time. Layer upon layer, it's like peeling an onion until you get to the soft inner core. When people are really hurting and you really listen with a pure desire to understand, you'll be amazed how fast they will open up. They want to open up. Children desperately want to open up, even more to their parents than to their peers. And they will, if they feel their parents will love them unconditionally and will be faithful to them afterwards and not judge or ridicule them. If you really seek to understand without hypocrisy and without guile, there will be times when you will be literally stunned with the pure knowledge and understanding that will flow to you from another human being. It isn't even always necessary to talk in order to empathize. In fact, sometimes words may just get in your way. That's one very important reason why technique alone will not work. That kind of understanding transcends technique. Isolated technique only gets in the way. I have gone through the skills of empathetic listening because skill is an important part of any habit. We need to have the skills, but let me reiterate that the skills will not be effective unless they come from a sincere desire to understand. People resent any attempt to manipulate them. In fact, if you're dealing with people you're close to, it's helpful to tell them what you are doing. I read this book about listening and empathy, and I thought about my relationship with you. I realized I haven't listened to you like I should, but I want to. It is hard for me. I may blow it at times, but I am going to work at it. I really care about you, and I want to understand. I hope you will help me. Affirming your motive is a huge deposit. But if you're not sincere, I wouldn't even try it. It may create an openness and a vulnerability that will later turn to your harm when a person discovers that you really didn't care, you really didn't want to listen, and he's left open, exposed, and hurt. The technique, the tip of the iceberg, has to come out of the massive base of character underneath. Now, there are people who protest that empathetic listening takes too much time. It may take a little more time initially, but it saves so much time downstream. The most efficient thing you can do if you're a doctor and want to prescribe a wise treatment is to make an accurate diagnosis. You can't say, "I'm in too much of a hurry. I don't have time to make a diagnosis. Just take this treatment." Oh, I remember writing one time in a room on the north shore of Oahu, Hawaii. There was a soft breeze blowing, and so I had opened 2 windows, one at the front and one at the side, to keep the room cool. I had a number of papers laid out, chapter by chapter, on a large table. Suddenly the breeze started picking up and blowing my papers about. I remember the frantic sense of loss I felt because things were no longer in order, including unnumbered pages, and I began rushing around the room trying desperately to put them back. Finally, I realized it would be better to take 10 seconds and close one of the windows. Empathetic listening takes time. Okay, sorry, empathic. Just making up words. Sorry. Empathic listening takes time, but it doesn't take anywhere near as much time as it takes to back up and correct misunderstandings when you're already miles down the road, to redo, to live with unexpressed and unsolved problems, to deal with the results of not giving people psychological air. A discerning, empathic listener can read what's happening down deep fast and can show such acceptance, such understanding, that other people feel safe to open up layer after layer until they get to that soft inner core where the problem really lies. People want to be understood, and whatever investment of time it takes to do that will bring much greater returns of time as you work from an accurate understanding of the problems and issues, and from the high emotional bank account that results when a person feels deeply understood. And the next is understanding and perception. As you learn to listen deeply to other people, you will discover tremendous differences in perception. You will also begin to appreciate the impact that these differences can have as people try to work together in interdependent situations. You see the young woman, I see the old lady, and both of us can be right. You may look at the world through spouse-centered glasses. I see it through the money-centered lens of economic concern. You may be scripted in the abundance mentality. I may be scripted in the scarcity mentality. You may approach problems from a highly visual, intuitive, holistic, right brain paradigm. I may be very left brain, very sequential, analytical, and verbal in my approach. Our perceptions can be vastly different, and yet we both have lived with our paradigms for years, thinking they are facts, and questioning the character or the mental competence of anyone who can't see the facts. Now, with all our differences, we're trying to work together in a marriage, in a job, in a community service project, to manage resources and accomplish results. So how do we do it? How do we transcend the limits of our individual perceptions so that we can deeply communicate, so that we can cooperatively deal with the issues and come up with win-win solutions? The answer is habit 5. It's the first step in the process of win-win. Even if, and especially when, the other person is not coming from that paradigm. Seek first to understand. This principle worked powerfully for one executive who shared with me the following experience. I was working with a small company that was in the process of negotiating a contract with a large national banking institution. This institution flew in their lawyers from San Francisco, their negotiator from Ohio, and presidents of 2 of their large banks to create an 8-person negotiating team. The company I worked with had decided to go for win-win or no deal. They wanted to significantly increase the level of service and the cost, but they had been almost overwhelmed with the demands of this large financial institution. The president of our company sat across the negotiating table and told them, "We would like for you to write the contract the way you want it, so that we can make sure we understand your needs and your concerns. We will respond to those needs and concerns. Then we can talk about pricing." The members of the negotiating team were overwhelmed. They were astounded that they were going to have the opportunity to write the contract. They took 3 days to come up with the deal. When they presented it, the president said, "Now let's make sure we understand what you want." And he went down the contract, rephrasing the content, reflecting the feeling, until he was sure that they were sure he understood what was important to them. "Yes, that's right. No, that's not exactly what we meant here. Yes, you've got it now." When he thoroughly understood their perspective, He proceeded to explain some concerns from his perspective. He proceeded to explain. And they listened. They were ready to listen. They weren't fighting for air. What had started out as a very formal, low trust, almost hostile atmosphere had turned into a fertile environment for synergy. At the conclusion of the discussions, the members of the negotiating team basically said, "We want to work with you. We want to do this deal. Just let us know what the price is and we'll sign." Okay. Then seek to be understood. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Knowing how to be understood is the other half of habit 5. And is equally critical in reaching win-win solutions. Earlier, we defined maturity as the balance between courage and consideration. Seeking to understand requires consideration. Seeking to be understood takes courage. Win-win requires a high degree of both, so it becomes important in interdependent situations for us to be understood. The early Greeks had a magnificent philosophy, which is embodied in 3 sequential arranged words: ethos, pathos, and logos. I suggest these 3 words contain the essence of seeking first to understand and making effective presentations. Ethos is your personal credibility, the faith people have in your integrity and competence. And competency. It's the trust that you inspire your emotional bank account. Pathos is the empathic side. It's the feeling. It means that you are in alignment with the emotional thrust of another person's communication. Logos is the logic, the reasoning part of the presentation. Notice the sequence: ethos, pathos, logos, your character and your relationships, and then the logic of your presentation. This represents another major paradigm shift. Most people, in making presentations, go straight to the logos, the left brain logic of their ideas. They try to convince other people of the validity of that logic without first taking ethos and pathos into consideration. I had an acquaintance who was very frustrated because his boss was locked into what he felt was an unproductive leadership style. "Why doesn't he do anything?" he asked me. "I've talked to him about it. He's aware of it, but he does nothing." "Well, why don't you make an effective presentation?" I asked. "I did," was the reply. "How do you define effective? Who do they send back to school when the salesman doesn't sell the buyer?" Effective means it works. It means it means P/PC. Sorry, it's cold. I seem to make more mistakes when it's cold. Did you create the change you wanted? Did you build the relationship in the process? What were the results of your presentation? I told you he didn't do anything. He wouldn't listen. Then make an effective presentation. You've got to empathize with his head. You've got to get into his frame of mind. You've got to make your point simply and visually and describe the alternatives he is in favor of better than he can himself. That will take some homework. Are you willing to do that? "Why do I have to go through all that?" he asked. In other words, you want him to change his whole leadership style, and you're not willing to change your method of presentation. I guess so, he replied. Well, then, I said, just smile about it and learn to live with it. I can't live with it, he said. It compromises my integrity. Okay, then, get to work on an effective presentation that's in your circle of influence. In the end, he would not do it. The investment seemed too great. Another acquaintance, a university professor, was willing to pay the price. He approached me one day and said, Stephen, I can't get to first base in getting the funding I need for my research because my research is really not in the mainstream of this department's interest. After discussing his situation at some length, I suggested that he develop an effective presentation using ethos, pathos, and logos. I know you're sincere, and the research you want to do would bring great benefits. Describe the alternative. They are in favor of better than they can themselves. Show that you understand them in depth. Then carefully explain the logic behind your request. Well, I'll try, he said. Do you want to practice with me? I asked. He was willing, and so we rehearsed his approach. When he went to make his presentation, he started by saying, Now let me see if I first understand what your objectives are and what your concerns are about this presentation and my recommendation. He took the time to do it slowly, gradually, in the middle of his presentation, demonstrating his depth of understanding and respect for their point of view. A senior professor turned to another professor, nodded, turned back to him and said, You've got your money. Excuse me. When you can present your own ideas clearly, specifically, visually, and most important, contextually, in the context of a deep understanding of their paradigms and concerns, you significantly increase the credibility of your ideas. You're not wrapped up in your own thing, delivering grandiose rhetoric from a soapbox. You really understand. What you're presenting may even be different from what you had originally thought, because in your effort to understand, you learned. Habit 5 lifts you to greater accuracy, greater integrity in your presentations, and people know that. They know you're presenting the ideas which you genuinely believe, taking all known facts and perceptions into consideration that will benefit everyone. Alright, I know this is going to be a little long, but we're going to finish 5 here if I continue, so stay with me, babies. One-on-one. Habit 5 is powerful because it is right in the middle of your circle of influence. Many factors in interdependent situations are in your circle of concern. Problems, disagreements, circumstances, other people's behavior. And if you focus your energies out there, you deplete them with little positive results. But you can always seek first to understand. That's something that is within your control. And as you do that, as you focus on your circle of influence, you really deeply understand other people. You have accurate information to work with. You get to the heart of matters quickly. You build emotional bank accounts, and you give people the psychological air they need so you can work together effectively. It's the inside-out approach, and as you do it, watch what happens to your circle of influence. Because you really listen, you became influenceable, and being influenceable is the key to influencing others. Your circle begins to expand. You increase your ability to influence many of the things in your circle of concern, and watch what happens to you. The more deeply you understand other people, the more you will appreciate them, the more reverent you will feel about them. To touch the soul of another human being is to walk on holy ground. Habit 5 is something you can practice right now. The next time you communicate with anyone, you can put aside your own autobiography and genuinely seek to understand. Even when people don't want to open up about the problems, you can be empathic. You can sense their hearts, you can sense the hurt, and you can respond. You seem down today. They may say nothing. That's all right. You've shown understanding and respect. Don't push. Be patient. Be respectful. People don't have to open up verbally before you can empathize. You can empathize all the time with their behavior. You can be discerning, sensitive, and aware, and you can live outside your autobiography when that is needed. And if you're highly proactive, you can create opportunities to do preventative work. You don't have to wait until your son or daughter has a problem with school or you have your next business negotiation to seek first to understand. Spend time with your children now, one-on-one. Listen to them. Understand them. Look at your home, at school life, at the challenges and the problems they're facing through their eyes. Build the emotional bank account. Give them air. Go out with your spouse on a regular basis. Have dinner or do something together you both enjoy. Listen to each other. Seek to understand. See life through each other's eyes. My daily time with Sandra is something I wouldn't trade for anything. As well as seeking to understand each other, we often take time to actually practice empathic listening skills to help us in communicating with our children. We often share our different perceptions of the situation, and we role play more effective approaches to different interpersonal family problems. I may act as if I am a son or daughter requesting a special privilege, even though I haven't fulfilled a basic family responsibility, and Sandra plays herself. We interact back and forth and try to visualize the situation in a very real way so that we can train ourselves to be consistent in modeling and teaching correct principles to our children. Some of our most helpful role plays come from redoing a past difficult or stressful scene in which one of us blew it. The time you invest to deeply understand the people you love brings tremendous dividends in open communication. Many of the problems that plague families and marriages simply don't have time to fester and develop. The communication becomes so open that potential problems can be nipped in the bud. And there are great reserves of trust in the emotional bank account to handle the problems that do arise. In business, you can set up one-on-one time with your employees. Listen to them, understand them. Set up human resource accounting, or stakeholder information systems in your business to get honest, accurate feedback at every level from customers, suppliers, and employees. Make the human element as important as the financial or the technical element. You save tremendous amounts of time, energy, and money when you tap into the human resources of a business at every level. When you listen, you learn, and you also give the people who work for you and with you psychological air. You inspire loyalty that goes well beyond the 8 to 5 physical demands of the job. Seek first to understand before the problems come up, before you try to evaluate and prescribe, before you try to present your own ideas. Seek to understand. It is a powerful habit of effective interdependence. When we really deeply understand each other, we open the door to creative solutions and third alternatives. Our differences are no longer stumbling blocks to communication and progress. Instead, they become the stepping stones to synergy. Now, the last little part here has 5 little application suggestions. I'm going to read through them. I know this is long, but I appreciate you being with me and hanging there. Number 1, select a relationship in which you sense the emotional bank account is in the red. Try to understand and write down the situation from the other person's point of view. In your next interaction, listen for understanding, comparing what you are hearing with what you wrote down. How valid were your assumptions? Did you really understand that individual's perspective? Number 2, share the concept of empathy with someone close to you. Tell him or her you want to work on really listening to others and ask for feedback in a week. How did you do? How did it make that person feel? Number 3, the next time you have an opportunity to watch people communicate, cover your ears for a few minutes and just watch. What emotions are being communicated that may not come across in words alone? Number 4, next time you catch yourself inappropriately using one of the autobiographical responses, probing, evaluating, advising, or interpreting, try to turn the situation into a deposit by acknowledgement and apology. I'm sorry, I just realized I'm not really trying to understand. Could we start again? And the final one, number 5, base your next presentation on empathy. Describe the other point of view as well as or better than its proponents. Then seek to have your point understood from their frame of reference. And that is the end of page 260. We'll start with habit 6 next. Thank you for being with me. I appreciate you.